Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next 2024 Senate election related video. And today we are going to be I'm going to be updating my prediction, or unveiling, I guess, my updated prediction for the 2024 Senate races as of the month of February 2023. Um, so yeah, so there's a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, I wanted to wish you all happy February. And I also wanted to thank all of you for, your incredible support. This channel has been blowing up recently. I saw today that we now have 80 subscribers. It does not seem like a lot in comparison to a lot of other people, but it really has been climbing slowly but surely over the last couple of months, weeks, following the midterm elections. And I hope that this time in between election cycles is a great time for us to grow. But once again, it's still a long ways off. So I am confident that we'll gain a lot in between, and we'll gain even more, as we get closer to election season. So I wanted to get that out of the way. But talking about the 2024 Senate elections, the map here is very unfavorable to the Democrats. They are holding 23 of the 34 seats that will be up next year. As you can see, 28 Democrats are not up for re-election this cycle, 38 Republicans are not. So that's a 10 point, that's a difference of 10 of 10 seats for the two political parties. This Senate class has been, one that Democrats have really locked down and built up, but it is now becoming a problem for them, as a lot of these states are trending rightward in 2018, of course, Republicans were able to pick off a lot of red state Democrats like Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, Claire McCaskill in Missouri, and Joe Donnelly in Indiana. They were even able to put Florida into their column with Rick Scott beating longtime Democrat Bill Nelson. And so but the reason Democrats were able to do so well and did not get completely blown out was because it was a blue wave year. They were able to flip Nevada and Arizona, hold on to Montana and West Virginia, as well as sweep the rest of the Rust Belt, besides Indiana, of course. But you get my point. It was a pretty, it was a favorable environment to Democrats, and they were lucky to have, dealt with that map at that time. But now we're in a presidential cycle, while when we're going to have a slightly worse map for the GOP, but still one where they are not holding, they are not holding many, many of the seats that they are holding, the vast majority of them are not going to be too competitive. There's really only one in particular, excuse me, in particular that I think is has a reasonable shot at flipping, and that is the state of Texas. But we'll get to that in a moment. While Democrats have, states like Nevada and Arizona to defend, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, pretty much all of the Rust Belt, and they've also got to hold on to West Virginia and Montana. And that's not even taking into account Virginia, which could become competitive if Glenn Youngkin enters the race. Although, I'll give my word on Virginia a little bit because I do think Youngkin's being a little overrated there. But overall, a lot of potential for Democrats to fall, but with a good environment in 2024, I think that they could come pretty close to holding the Senate majority, although I think it's going to be very hard for them to maintain that, that position in the upper chamber of Congress. Now, looking at Biden's approval rating, it's gotten a bit worse. I think that in part the classified document scandal did, hurt him a little bit, but I think that it hurt him a little bit. He's pretty much back to where he was, just a couple of months ago, but still not terrible. He's pretty much where he was at the time of the midterm elections, actually doing a little bit better. But I think overall the approval rating, as was shown in the midterms, did not, it didn't really have that much of an impact. Yes, Democrats lost the House, but they were already dealing with a slim majority to begin with, and they increased their majority in the Senate. And looking at the very early 2024 generic ballot polling data, it looks pretty much even. Emerson College has Democrats up by 3. Hart Research Associates and Public Opinion Strategies has an R+1 result, so it's pretty much all over the place. I do think that 2024 will be a more democratic environment than these midterms were, but again, we'll just have to wait and see. So now we're going to get into the actual prediction. We'll start by filling out these safe blue and red states. These are the states that will go to either party by over 15 points. They have no reasonable shot of going, they really don't have any chance at all of going to the other political party or the opposing party. As you can see here, Democrats are brought up to 40 seats, while Republicans are only four away from the maximum amount that they would need to take the Senate majority, and that's just assuming that Democrats, win the White House, because, in that case, a Republican vice president, if there is a Republican president and a GOP vice president would be able to break the tie in a 50-50 Senate, just like Kamala Harris did for Democrats for the past 2 years. So I'll point out a couple of these states because I think that they're interesting. California, this is, a very solid Democratic state, but Dianne Feinstein, seems to be on her way out. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there, but she seems to be, kind of winding down. She said that she would make her announcement sometime, I think around the springtime. Katie Porter and Adam Schiff have both gotten into the race. Since my last prediction, this race has really blown up. So it looks like we're going to have a pretty competitive Democratic field of candidates here. The GOP obviously is not going to win in California, but the interesting thing is that if too many Democratic candidates get into the race, there is like a very, very small possibility of two Republicans escaping from the primary field. But once again, I'm not going to even, bet my money on that. That is an insane thing to imagine really happening. There would need to be so much, vote splitting between the two candidates, between the multiple candidates on the Democratic side, and I don't really think that that's very realistic. That's the only way that California could even potentially go red, but it's very, very unlikely. So yeah, just wanted to make that note there. New York, I know that Kathy Hochul did pretty badly in her governor's race, but again, governor's races are a lot different than Senate races, and I do think Democrats will start to gain back a little bit of ground in New York in 2024, particularly in the House races. But again, I think that there's something to be said about what's happening in New York. I think in general, I would agree. I would agree that it's becoming slightly redder, but. I don't think Kirsten Gillibrand's in too much trouble here. Minnesota, if you're wondering why it's solid blue, it's because Amy Klobuchar is the Democratic incumbent here. She's pretty popular. She'll win easily. And in Missouri, I've seen a lot of people talking about this one potentially being a competitive state with Josh Hawley. But the truth of the matter is I understand that Eric Schmidt only won by 13 points, and he was pretty much the best candidate the GOP could have fielded in 2022 against Trudy Bush Valentine. But this was a closer race than it was expected. But this Senate seat, for some reason, just will not vote for a Republican by a solid margin. I'll go back and show you the Class 3 Senate seat. This one, Roy Blunt, of course, couldn't even win by 15 points in 2010. It really, it just for some reason it will not vote for Republicans by a solid margin. I think that Bush Valentine was also a good candidate for the Democrats. I think Lucas Coons, who ran for Senate against Bush Valentine, is coming back to run against Hawley. He could make it under 15, and I think Hawley. There's a good chance he underperforms Trump at the presidential level. I think Trump will be the nominee for president, but it could be DeSantis or somebody else. So overall, Missouri, could be likely. I think you can make that case, but I mean, some people are saying it's going to be like a 7 or 8 point victory. Considering Claire McCaskill lost by 6, and she was a really good incumbent in 2018, I don't see that happening. Excuse me, I don't see that happening. I think that we're going to see a pretty solid result for Josh Hawley. So now we have 13 states that are not considered safe. Some of these will be on the will be on the borders of being safe. Others will be highly, highly competitive and will be races to watch. So now we're going to start off, or we're going to go into these, non-safe states these all of these, these remaining states. We'll start with the likely states, and these are the states that will go to either party by between 5 and 15 points. They're not, some of them are really close to being hyper competitive, others are pretty close to being safe. It's a big gap. And yeah, basically the way to think of it is that it's pretty unlikely for these states to go to the opposition party, but it's not entirely impossible. So we'll start off with the likely states for the Democrats. New Mexico, I think Martin Heinrich will win re-election. I think that he's a pretty average incumbent for a Democrat in New Mexico. Um, I think the only reason he won by 24 points in 2018 was because of the libertarian Gary Johnson, who took away 15% of the vote from the Republican. He's not a bad incumbent by any means, but I think I don't really see this being. You can make an argument for it being safe. I think it's safe by probability, just because Mark Ronchetti could not make that governor's race, but with it could not get that governor's race margin, within 5 points. I think Heinrich is a clear favorite as of now. Don't get me wrong. I do not think Republicans are going to win in New Mexico. But either way, I think he wins by like 12 to 13. I think, he outruns Biden by a couple of points in New Mexico because I think he's a bit better for Hispanic voters. So, now for Virginia, as I was saying, Glenn Youngkin could make this race somewhat competitive if he goes after Tim Kaine, the incumbent Democrat here. But Kaine's a pretty good candidate, a pretty good incumbent. He is pretty non-controversial, not a very nationalized figure. He won by 16 points in 2018, and he could win by a solid margin. I've seen most people put this as a safe blue seat, and I could see it as well. But Virginia, I think it's definitely a left trending state, and it's going. I think that a lot of people are overhyping the Virginia GOP for winning the governor's race. Because I think you can also say that Spanberger won her reelection in the seventh district last year. Democrats did pretty well in Virginia in 2022. Not amazing because Hung Kao came pretty close. Came a lot closer than I thought to beating Jennifer Wexton, and also Elaine Luria lost. But overall, I don't really see, Virginia's more Republican down ballot, and it's a governor's race, so it's more, there's more potential for for voters to cross over. So I think Virginia, Glenn Youngkin could make it within single digits, but I think Tim Kaine's a popular incumbent. I don't see how he loses. Going to New Jersey. Excuse me. Going to New Jersey, you may be surprised to see this as likely. Bob Menendez is the Democrat here. He is pretty scandal plagued. I won't get into all of it here. It is just a very complicated situation with him. But he underperformed. He only won by 11 points in 2018. Not a very impressive performance at all, especially considering the national environment. I don't think that I think he would win by a little bit more this time because of it being a presidential year. But there have been some recent, I guess, federal. I think he got indicted a little bit before the midterms. But anyway, something was going on with his legal, status. Anyways, uh, yeah, I think that some of his scandals got brought up again. So I think if Republicans nominate a decent candidate like Jack Ciattarelli or Tom Keene Jr., the representative from the seventh district, I think they could make this relatively close. But I still think Menendez would win by a decent amount. It's New Jersey. It's got potential for Republicans, but I don't think Ciattarelli is going to run. He said he's going to run for governor in 2025, and so yeah, I don't think it really makes sense. No, he Menendez won't lose, but he will underperform Biden. And finally, in Pennsylvania, Bob Casey Jr. is a very strong Democratic incumbent, and I think he is clearly a favorite to win re-election. I think you could see a lot of candidates on the Republican side come and take him on. Dr. Oz could come back. I don't think he would do too well. Kathy Barnett would be disastrous for the GOP. The state treasurer, Stacey Garrity, I think she'd be decent. And obviously the big outlier here, the one who's expressed interest, is Doug Mastriano, who lost the governor's race to Josh Shapiro by 15 points last year. He would probably make this a solid D race, to be honest, especially against Casey, who I think is In general, a better candidate than Shapiro. But they're both very strong candidates. So I think Mastriano, there's a chance that he is the GOP nominee. But I don't think he will run. I think the most likely candidate for the Republicans is Dave McCormick, who lost the GOP Senate primary to Oz in 2022. He lost by I think it was less than 1,000 votes. I think it was like 930 votes or something like that. Anyways, I think he would have won the Senate race against John Fetterman. He was a carpetbagger as well, but he did not come off as disingenuous as Oz did. I think that he was just, he was a better candidate overall. He was more, he resonated better with moderate voters. And I think that he would put up a decently strong fight to, Casey, but I still don't think that he would, be able to come. I don't think that he would be too competitive here. He could bring it to lean. I think he's the only, he's the one Republican where I could see it being lean, but even then, that's a pretty big stretch. Um, so yeah, so Casey I think would win by 6 or 7 as of now. I think Pennsylvania is going to be pretty solid for Democrats on the Senate level. Now getting into the two likely Republican states. The first is Florida. Rick Scott's not a good incumbent, but Florida has shown us how much it's trending right. We saw it. From 2016 to 2018, the Miami-Dade area started drifting right. And then it's swung heavily to the right in 2020 as well. And in 2022, the county, Miami-Dade voted for DeSantis by 11 points, and then, voted for Rubio by 10. DeSantis won re-election by 19 overall statewide, and Rubio won by 16. So I think overall, Florida has shown us that it is a very, very much a right-trending state, and I don't think that Scott's going to win by that much because he's not as good for Hispanics, or just he's not a very charismatic guy at all. I think he's very controversial. You can say that about DeSantis or Rubio, but I think that Scott is just overall a worse candidate. But he wins. He beat Bill Nelson. And you can say the trends helped him. But yeah, I think Florida is going to be very hard for Democrats. I think their only hope of even making it competitive is with running Stephanie Murphy, who I think she is a solid candidate, but she's just not. There's no way she would win. It is a very very it is a very, very, Republican trending state. I don't think, I think that Scott would underperform, either Trump or DeSantis here, but he would still win by, probably 7 or 8 points, maybe 9 to 10, depending on how bad it is for Florida Democrats in 2 years. And the other likely state is this is going to be a flip. It is going to be the state of West Virginia. Joe Manchin is the Democratic incumbent here. Very, he's a very nationalized figure, very conservative, very blue dog, conservative Democrat. He is in some really big trouble for 2024. He used to dominate in West Virginia. West Virginia used to be a Democratic stronghold, but even when it was starting to trend Republican, Manchin, was able to do really well in his governor's races, and he won his reelection to the Senate in 2012. This was when he won his first full term. He was first elected in 2010, but when he was first elected to his or when he was elected to his first full term. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling. He won by 24 points, and this was a solid margin. But in a much better Democratic environment, in 2018, he only won by 3 points against Patrick Morrisey, who was the Attorney General of West Virginia, but he did not run a very strong campaign. And I think that Manchin, really got helped by the national environment, and he was winning polling data pretty early on. About a year ago, he was pretty much decimating all Republican challengers, and I think that was because he had built up, this name recognition in West Virginia as the Democrat in name only. He was one of the most popular senators in America, but since supporting the Inflation Reduction Act, his approval ratings have just tanked. I think he has a 53% disapproval rating according to Political Morning Consult. I think Alex Mooney is running in this race. Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, could very well run as well. I think he's probably going to run and be the GOP nominee. West Virginia under Justice could even be a safe margin, but I think that he would win by around 10 points. I think Manchin's a good enough incumbent. where he would keep it under 15, even against a candidate as strong as Justice. But West Virginia is kind of one of is I think that Joe Manchin's going to become the Tim Ryan of 2024, as in, he's going to be doing so well, and going to be outperforming almost everyone else, in terms of partisanship of their states. But it's just West Virginia is a state that voted for Trump by 40. It's going to be very hard to build a path to victory for Manchin. It's not impossible, but it's pretty unlikely. I think that he has less than a 20% chance of winning as of right now. So now we're going to get into the seven remaining states. These are the highly competitive states. Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Wisconsin, and Michigan were all super competitive states in 2020. Montana and Ohio, not so much, but they will be in here as well with very strong Democratic incumbents running for reelection. Or at least in Ohio. We're not sure what's going on with John Tester, but I assume he will run again. So anyways, we're going to go into the lean states now, which will be decided between 1 to 5 percentage points. These are, highly competitive, but they are, decent. They're basically lean is basically the category of showing that states that you think will go a certain way, but have a very solid or very have a very plausible chance of going in the other direction. And tilt are the next one, and tilt after that, are the toss ups, and they will, they are, pretty much, completely up in the air. But if you made me decide on a candidate, that's what I would the that is the party that I would choose. Anyways, I guess that was kind of confusing. But anyways, let's get into it. I'm tired. So yeah, I apologize. So for the lean Democratic states, the first one is Michigan. Debbie Stabenow announced last month that she would be retiring from the Senate, which was a bit of a surprise considering she had said that she was going to run for reelection. But again, it's not the first time we've seen it happen. Sometimes senators go back on their promises and decide to retire. And Stabenow's been in the Senate for a long time, so she, if anything, I think that she's deserves to live, to you know, leave for as of right now, or I think that it's time for her to go. I think that she has done more than enough to for her state. But anyways, there are a lot of Democrats and Republicans who could run in this race. Haley Stevens, who I think was a considered a candidate for a while, but she has declined. Gretchen Whitmer's not running. Andy Levin and Dan Kildee have decided not to run. Pete Buttigieg, who used to live in Indiana but moved to Michigan recently, he's not running. There are a lot of potential Democrats though who could run. Eliza Slotkin has expressed interest. She's the representative from the seventh district. You have the Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, the Lieutenant Governor. And you have Debbie Dingell, Hillary Schulten, who flipped Peter Meyer's seat. But either way, lots of Democrats, lots of potential matchups here. On the Republican side as well, you got a lot too. I think that Lisa McClain is probably the most likely candidate to run in this race. You could potentially see, Peter Meyer come back and try to win the primary, but I think he'd have a really hard time, considering he was in such an ancestrally Republican part of Michigan, and yet he could not win. Sorry about that. If you saw the calculator on the screen, I guess it just popped up. But anyways, I think that Meyer would be a he would be a decent candidate. He would be moderate, but it would be really hard for him to get past the primary. John James could run, but he's already lost twice. And I don't really see anyone else here who's catches my eye. Really, Bill Schwett would be terrible. Fred Upton would be all right, but I don't think he's gonna run. He just retired from the House. I think he's done with politics, and he couldn't win a primary either. Yeah, James Craig I think would be a decent candidate, but I still don't think he would win. Michigan I think is just it's a competitive state, but it's very much a Democratic leaning swing state, and I think that it's going to stay that way. I think that Democrats have a solid bench here. Republicans do as well, but I think that overall Democrats win this. The Michigan goes blue by around 4 to 5 points. Um, Then going to the state of Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin's a pretty strong incumbent, but if she gets a really strong challenger like Micah Gallagher, I think that she could be in real trouble here. She's good for the rural areas, and I think that she's decent for the suburbs and Madison and Milwaukee as well. I think that she's an above average Democrat for Wisconsin. But Gallagher, would be really good for the Green Bay suburbs. I don't know if he's going to run. My guess is he will, and I think he would lose by around 2 points, but he could easily make it closer. And if Trump's on the ballot to do really well in the rural areas, that could really help him. As long as he improves in the Milwaukee and Madison suburbs. But either way, I think that Baldwin's a decent enough incumbent to hold on. She won by 11 points in 2018. It was against a terrible GOP candidate, for sure. But I still think that was a really impressive performance, and I think that it's hard to see Baldwin going down. I think Gallagher, he might not even run, and it might be someone like Brian Steele, who's another congressman. He would be decent. He's from I guess the Kenosha area, down here, below Milwaukee on the border with Chicago. But I don't think that either one of them would beat Baldwin, although it would be close. In Nevada, I think that this is a pretty clear lean D state. I think that Jackie Rosen is going to win her reelection. The Republicans do not have a clear bench here. Adam Laxalt couldn't win in 2022, and Republicans are always expected, or are almost always overestimated in Nevada. Quite literally, it's been in almost every single election cycle for the past decade, besides 2020, when they were underestimated. But anyways, Nevada state where Democrats are underestimated. Catherine Cortez Masto won her reelection here. I think that there's definitely I think Nevada is a right trending state. The trends in Clark County are not favorable to Democrats with Hispanic voters, and we saw that sink Steve Sisolak's reelection campaign last year. But I think Washoe, Washoe is county in which is pretty much in western northwestern Nevada by Reno. That is a suburban county. It's drifting left. I think that it's going to help Democrats in the future, and Republicans might even run like a Dr. Oz type candidate like Rick Harrison, who's a TV personality from Nevada. He would be terrible. I think Marco Mode would be a decent candidate. The congressman from the second district. I think the only candidate who I think would be favored to defeat Rosen on the Republican side would be the former governor Brian Sandoval. But I don't think he's going to run. If he does, I will change my mind about this race in a heartbeat. I think that he would win this race. I probably have it as tilt, maybe even Leonard, just because he's such a good candidate for the GOP. But I don't think he's going to run in Nevada. Is shown that it is stubbornly blue, even if it only votes Democratic by a hair. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Nevada. And we got a couple of lean Republican states as well. In Texas, I think that, we're going to see Ted Cruz, not perform amazingly, but I think he'll do better than he did in 2018. I don't think that Texas is ready to go yet for the Democrats. I think that, they're going to run. I don't think they're going to run Beto O'Rourke. I think that I think he's kind of, proven to a lot of, or kind of, made a lot of Democrats think that he is unelectable, and I don't think that he's unelectable. I think that, he was put up against he was put in some very hard situations, and I think the fact that he lost to Greg Abbott by 11 points is impressive considering that, Abbott won by 13 points in 2018, which was a bluer year. um, than 2022. So it does show that Texas is drifting left. Ted Cruz is really unpopular. You can say Abbott's, unpopular, but he's not, super, super controversial. And I think that, Cruz is, he's so unpopular to the point where he will probably underperform Trump in Texas. But, I don't think that Democrats aren't in the position to win this race. I think that they will continue to do worse in the Rio Grande Valley, but I think that they will improve in the suburbs, and that's what's going to make this race close. I think that one of the Castro brothers, Julian or Joaquin Castro would be a very good candidate. Would be very good candidates for this race. You could also see like Colin Alfred or Lizzie Fletcher, running this race, and I think that all of them would be solid candidates. I just don't think that any of them would be able to win. I think that Texas, it's moving in the same direction Arizona and Georgia have been towards Democrats, but I think that it's going to take a little bit more time for Texas. Yeah. In Arizona, this is going to give the GOP the Senate majority. There are 51 seats now. And Arizona, I was going to move this down to tilt Republican, but the deal with what's been happening here is Ruben Gallego, as expected, has announced that he has run or that he will be running for Senate against Kirsten Sinema, and that's a problem for Democrats because there is a really good chance. Now, I think Gallego's going to get second place. I think that he's going to get the majority of the Democratic vote, but even his own internals are showing that Kirsten Sinema is getting a lot of the vote, even though she is so unpopular among Democrats. I think that in a primary election, the primary election was looking really bad for Kirsten Sinema. You know, it's unclear if she would have been able to turn that around. But seeing even Gallego's internal polling, Cinema's at 24% in this poll, and Gallego and Lake are at and Carrie Lake are at 36%. I do think Carrie Lake will run for Senate. It looks like she's going to run, and probably she will be the GOP nominee, just because the Arizona GOP does not have a brain in their head. The leaders of the Arizona Republican Party do not have brains in their heads. But yeah, just I think that Carrie Lake would not be a good candidate for this race, but when you have so much vote splitting happening between the Democrats here, I think that that's really going to hurt, Ruben Gallego here. I think that he would beat Carrie Lake on his own. As you can see, this one-on-one matchup between Lake and Gallego, he wins by 5 points. I don't think he'd win by that much, but I do think it would be a lean blues race in that instance. But I think it's going to be, really hard for Democrats to, talk, to convince Cinema not to run. I think the Gallego got in there early for a reason, maybe because he didn't want, he wanted to build up his name recognition, and I think he's going to get the majority of the Democratic base. But when you think about it, the argument a lot of people have been making is that Arizona's going to, Cinema's going to take away more Republican voters and more moderates. But when you take out the moderates from Arizona, Democrats are put at a disadvantage to Republicans, and I honestly don't see, Carrie Lake, or many, that many, GOP, really any GOP nominee losing more support than a Democrat. Sometimes vote splitting is not as great as, it, seems to be. I don't think that it's going to be 24%. I think that, Cinema's going to get like 8 or 9%, like, to be honest. But I do think that, he the vast majority of the voters that vote for Cinema will be Democrats who are not comfortable voting for Gallego or moderates. And so I think that when you're looking at that, you see Republicans do have an advantage in Arizona, without moderates backing Democrats. So I think Arizona, right now a lean Republican state, but we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe Democrats can pull off a miracle and convince the party to convince Gallego to drop out and, have the full party unite behind Cinema. Um, you know, so now we're going to get down to the two toss-up states. Republicans already have the Senate majority, but Democrats do have a chance to, get to 49 seats. So there would only really be a GOP majority of, one or two, depending on who the president is, or who controls the White House. So right now I'm going to put Montana. Actually, I will put. I'll just do them both here. I think Ohio and Montana will both be tilt Republican. I'll go over Ohio first. So Matt Dolan has announced that he is running for this Senate seat. He is he ran against J.D. Vance in the Republican primary last year. Came in at a respectable third place, and he's a good candidate to take on Sherrod Brown, but I don't think he's anything too special. I think that it's really just the partisanship of this district that is really, or, not this district, but the partisanship of Ohio and how right trending it is going to be really hard for Brown to overcome. In 2018, he had a respectable performance, sure, but, the Republicans put up a really bad candidate in Jim Renacci or Renacci. I swear to God, I do not know how to say his name. But Point is, Renesi did not have enough money. Was not even close to being competitive with Brown, and yet he was still able to come within 7 points. I think that yes, Ohio's just a ticket splitting state. I think that it will be very very good for Brown compared to the Democratic nominee for president, but I don't think it's going to be nearly enough to or I don't think that it's going to be enough to reelect him. I think that it's going to be pretty close, and I think Frank LaRose will probably be the GOP nominee as of right now, but it could be easily be like Warren Davidson or, as I said, Matt Dolan. So I think it'll be a pretty close race, but Brown, I think right now is narrowly favored to lose re-election. And finally, in Montana, I'm moving this down to tilt Republican. I think John Tester is a really solid incumbent, and I think that he's able to beat polarization. But considering the amount of ticket splitting that would need to happen for him to win, in a presidential year, I think that considering the polarization that has been, considering how polarized our country has become, and the fact that 2024 is likely not going to be a blue wave, although I do think it will be a Democratic leaning year. I think that that overall is going to be too much for Tester to overcome. If it's someone like Ryan Zinke that he's up against, I think that that's going to make it a little bit easier. I think he would win against Zinke probably by a tilt margin, but I think against someone like Matt Rosendale, the congressman from the second district, who I think ran against Tester in 2018. I think he's going to be the Republican nominee. I think that he would beat Tester very narrowly. He Tester would outrun Biden by a lot in Montana, but I just don't think it would be enough, and so as a result, I think that he would lose. But again, I would be, you could talk me into a Tester victory in the state of Montana. I think that he is a very good candidate for the state, and I think he is severely underrated. So in the final map, sorry for all of that rambling, but essentially not a lot changes from my early January prediction. Republicans net a total of 4 seats by picking up Arizona, Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia, which gets them from 49 seats to 53 seats, while Democrats go from 51 to 47, but still have a pretty respectable performance instead, by holding on to Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and pretty much the rest of their states, as well as Republicans holding on to Texas and Florida. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it was really long. It was really long. It's I'm looking at the clock here. It says it's been 37 minutes. So sorry about that. I need to make these videos a little bit shorter. But once again, just trying to get as much information here and as much explanation here. Once again, you don't have to watch the full video if you want to get into the really competitive states. I would not mind it if you guys skip over some of this. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, turn on notifications so you don't miss another one of my videos. Check out my non-political channel, Interactive127, and my comrades channel, Growling2666. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.